A doomed city, a dead man walking. Rain hammered down like gunfire against the smog-choked skyline of Tarsus 3. The towering megacity stretched for miles in every direction, once the crown jewel of the Galactic Compact. Now it was a ticking corpse, wrapped in neon lights and the stink of burning bodies. And at its center, walking calmly through the chaos, was Jonah Vasquez. A human. A mercenary. A man who had no business being here. Because in precisely 6 hours, the entire planet would cease to exist. A job gone to hell. Jonah had one simple job: deliver a shipment of high-grade plasma cores to a buyer in Tarsus 3. Easy money. But somewhere between landing and closing the deal, everything went to hell. Now the city was on fire, the streets filled with riot squads, insurgents, and compact death drones, all tearing each other apart in a war that hadn't even been declared yet. And the worst part? Jonah had no idea which side he was on. The prophecy of fire. The moment he stepped off the cargo lift, he knew something was wrong. The air buzzed with tension. People muttered prayers under their breath. He turned to the nearest street vendor, a frail Varakian woman, her 6 eyes filled with terror. "What's going on?" Jonah asked. She looked at him like a man already in his grave. "The prophet has spoken," she whispered. "The cleansing fire is coming." Jonah's blood ran cold. Because that phrase wasn't just some religious nonsense. It was a death sentence. It meant someone had triggered the faith engines, massive orbital weapons capable of turning an entire world into a funeral pyre. And there was only one faction crazy enough to use them. The Crimson Doctrine arrives. The Crimson Doctrine was a radical human cult that believed the galaxy needed purification through fire. And they weren't just zealots with guns, they were rich, powerful, and had enough warships to make the Compact sweat. Jonah had spent years dodging their influence. Now, standing in the middle of their next target, he realized he was the right man in the worst place possible. And if he didn't get out soon, he'd be reduced to ash along with everyone else. A city in revolt. A deafening alarm screamed through the streets. Boom. A plasma detonation ripped through the eastern district, sending bodies and debris into the sky. The Compact's enforcer droids stormed the streets, laying down pulse fire at anything that moved. From the rooftops, masked insurgents returned fire, their rifles blazing in defiance. Jonah didn't need to ask who was winning. The Doctrine's cultists were everywhere. And the Compact? The Compact was losing, badly. In the distance, a massive cathedral-like ship descended from the clouds, its red banners unfurling in the burning sky. The Crimson Doctrine had arrived. And Jonah was right in the middle of it all. The wrong cargo, the right problem. Jonah's communicator buzzed in his ear. "Vasquez, we got a problem." It was Rex, his old partner and the only reason Jonah was still breathing. Jonah ducked behind a burning vehicle. "You think?" "No, I mean a real problem. The plasma cores we were delivering? They aren't just plasma cores." Jonah felt his stomach drop. "What are they?" Silence. Then Rex's voice, low and dangerous. "They're the ignition keys for the faith engines. The choice that doomed a world." Jonah's hands shook as the realization hit. He had just delivered the final piece of the Doctrine's genocidal plan. The only way to stop the destruction of Tarsus 3 was to steal back those ignition keys. And to do that, Jonah would have to walk straight into the Doctrine's stronghold, a place no one walked out of alive. A single man against the flames. Jonah checked his rifle. 1 magazine left. He exhaled. Then he did the only thing he could. He started running toward the fire. A dead man's mission. Jonah ran through the war zone as the city crumbled around him. Plasma bolts hissed past his head, explosions shook the ground, and the air was thick with the stench of burning flesh. His mission: steal back the ignition keys. The problem? They were already inside the Crimson Doctrine's stronghold, a fortress buried deep within the war-torn city. And the only way in? Jonah had to walk through hell itself. The path through ruin. The streets of Tarsus 3 had become a slaughterhouse. The Compact's enforcer droids fought like demons, unleashing torrents of gunfire at the insurgents. The Doctrine's zealots met them head-on, armed with energy blades and suicide charges, screaming prayers as they tore through metal and flesh alike. Civilians? They were trapped in the crossfire, their screams lost in the chaos. Jonah kept moving. He had no time to be a hero, not today. If he didn't reach the stronghold, the entire planet would be purged in holy fire. And that was something he couldn't let happen. The contact. His earpiece buzzed. "Jonah, where the hell are you?" It was Rex, his partner, the only man in the galaxy who could match Jonah's talent for getting into trouble. "On my way to the stronghold," Jonah panted, dodging between burning vehicles. Tell me you have a plan. I've got a way in, but it's suicidal. Jonah snorted. So, the usual. Yeah. Meet me at the old core spire. Jonah frowned. That place is crawling with zealots. Exactly. Jonah sighed, checking his ammo. He really hated this job. The core spire. The core spire was a towering industrial monolith, a pre-war energy relay that the doctrine had converted into a holy temple, and it was swarming with cultists. Jonah crouched behind cover, scanning the entrance. Dozens of doctrine fanatics stood guard, their weapons gleaming red under the glow of the burning city. And in the middle of it all was Rex, handcuffed, beaten, a gun to his head. Jonah swore under his breath. Damn it, Rex. A one-man assault. Jonah had 3 bullets left, and he needed to take down at least a dozen men. So he did the only thing that made sense. He stood up, raised his gun, and shot the closest zealot in the head. Chaos erupted instantly. The fanatics turned, screaming, their weapons blazing as they opened fire. Jonah dove for cover, rolling as plasma bolts tore through the air where he'd just been standing. He grabbed a fallen rifle, not his usual style, but it would have to do. Then he unleashed hell. The breaking point. It was over in seconds. Jonah moved like a ghost, cutting through the fanatics with precision gunfire. By the time the last one hit the ground, he was already uncuffing Rex. You always gotta make things difficult, huh? Jonah grinned. Rex wiped blood from his mouth. Screw you. I had it under control. Jonah gestured to the pile of dead zealots. Yeah, I can see that. Rex grinned. We going after the ignition keys? Jonah reloaded his weapon. Damn right we are. Because if they failed, Tarsus 3 was as good as dead. The road to damnation. Jonah and Rex ran through the ruins of Tarsus 3, dodging gunfire and leaping over debris as the planet fell apart around them. The doctrine's stronghold was less than 2 kilometers away, an ancient citadel, its towers burning under the relentless bombardment. But the real problem? The ignition keys weren't just inside the fortress. They were inside the Cathedral of Purity, a sanctum protected by doctrine fanatics, plasma barriers, and a war priest so insane even his own people feared him. Jonah groaned. Why is it never easy? Rex grinned, reloading his rifle. If it was, they wouldn't need guys like us. A change of plans. Jonah tapped his earpiece. Operator, we're closing in. We need a back door into the cathedral. The reply came fast. You're not gonna like it. Jonah already hated it. Give me the bad news first. The doctrine has a backup ignition key. If you take too long, they'll activate the purge manually. Jonah swore. And the good news? There's a way in through the catacombs. Rex frowned. That sounds like a trap. It probably is. Jonah checked his ammo. Let's go anyway. Because there was no turning back now. The catacombs. The tunnels beneath the fortress were older than the war itself. Dust choked the air. The walls were covered in ancient doctrine scripture, scrawled in blood and ash. But the worst part? The bones. Thousands of them. The remains of past heretics, rebels, and anyone who had ever dared defy the doctrine. Rex swallowed. Remind me why we do this again? Jonah stepped over a half-rotted skull. Because someone has to. And then, a roar echoed through the tunnels. Something was down here with them. The Guardian. Jonah raised his rifle just as the darkness moved. A hulking figure stepped forward, 7 feet tall, wrapped in rusted armor, its face hidden behind a metal mask carved with sacred scripture. A war zealot. A doctrine executioner, a man who had given up his name, his past, his humanity for one purpose, to kill in the name of faith. It raised its war axe, the blade crackling with dark energy. And then it charged. Jonah and Rex opened fire. Bullets ripped through the darkness, but the zealot didn't slow down. Jonah barely dodged as the axe slammed into the ground, shattering stone and bone alike. Rex aimed for the head. Go down, damn it. The zealot caught the bullet with its bare hand. Jonah's blood ran cold. This was bad. Fighting the unkillable. Jonah knew they couldn't win this fight. So he stopped fighting. Instead, he pulled the pin on a plasma grenade and rolled it between the zealot's feet. The explosion lit up the tunnel like a dying sun. And the zealot screamed as its armor melted, staggering back into the shadows. Jonah didn't wait to see if it was dead. He ran. Move! He shouted. Rex didn't argue. They sprinted through the catacombs, dodging collapsing walls until finally, they burst into the Cathedral of Purity. And that's when they saw him. The war priest. Standing over the ignition key, a mad grin on his scarred, holy face. waiting for them. The war priest. The war priest of the doctrine stood before them, clad in robes of fire and steel. The man's face was a map of scars, his eyes burning with fanaticism. In his hands he held a massive relic blade, its edge wreathed in divine plasma. Behind him, resting on a pedestal etched with sacred symbols, was the ignition key, the only way to stop the purge. Jonah and Rex barely had a second to breathe before the war priest moved. And when he moved, it was like death itself had come for them. A fight against faith itself. The war priest crossed the distance in a blink, his blade swinging with the fury of 1,000 sermons. Jonah barely managed to duck, feeling the heat of the plasma blade burn the air above him. Rex fired. Point blank. It didn't matter. The war priest's armor absorbed the shots like raindrops against a mountain. Jonah went for his knife, a last-ditch effort, but the war priest caught his wrist, twisting until bones nearly snapped. With his free hand, the zealot punched Jonah in the chest, sending him crashing through a marble pillar. Everything spun. His vision blurred. Ribs cracked. Damn it. This wasn't a fight. This was a slaughter. A plan made of desperation. Jonah forced himself to stand, his breathing ragged. They weren't going to win this. Not in a fair fight. Jonah's gaze flicked to the ignition key. It was connected to dozens of energy conduits, its interface glowing with stored power. That gave him an idea. He grabbed his last plasma grenade and armed it. Rex, cover me. His partner didn't hesitate. Rex unloaded his entire magazine at the war priest, not to kill, but to distract. The fanatic roared and charged Rex, his focus locked. That was all Jonah needed. He dashed for the pedestal, jumped over the conduits, and slammed the grenade down onto the power core. The detonation erupted like a dying star. Faith falls. The shockwave tore through the cathedral. The war priest staggered, the explosion ripping apart his armor, sending him crashing to his knees. Jonah didn't give him a chance to recover. He grabbed a fallen rifle and emptied it into the zealot's skull. The body crumpled. And the war priest, the last obstacle between them and salvation, was gone. The final choice. The ignition key remained intact, but now it was malfunctioning. The auto-purge sequence was already counting down. Jonah pulled up the controls. There were two options left. Override the purge. Save the planet, but risk an orbital counterattack from the doctrine. Redirect the purge. Send the flames into the doctrine's own fleet, turning their weapon against them. Jonah and Rex shared a look. And without a word, they made their choice. The galaxy burns. Above them, in the void, the doctrine fleet prepared to fire. But before they could, the ignition key activated. Fire erupted across the heavens. The doctrine's own weapons turned against them, their warships consumed in holy fire. One by one, their vessels went dark, their once invincible fleet crumbling in seconds. On the surface, the people of Tarsus, 3 watched in awe. The invincible tyrants were falling. And Jonah? He watched in silence as the ashes of war drifted across the sky. A new beginning. Jonah and Rex stepped out of the ruins, their bodies broken, but victorious. The doctrine was crippled. The war had just changed forever. Jonah took a deep breath, staring at the burning wreckage of what was once an empire. Faith, fire, fortune. The galaxy would never be the same. Rocket fire, this is just the beginning. Want more stories of war, rebellion, and impossible victories? Subscribe now and stay for the next chapter of the burning galaxy.